Yo, yo, it's the biggest.
All right, so what's up, her?
What's up, Miguel?
How you doing, man?
Hanging in there, you know. Got some grow out, some Joe out, and hanging in there.
I just got a fresh cut from my wife. She's been hooking it up, so
It's nice. It's kind of, I mean, you have a really complicated hair style.
yeah, it's
So
funny.
it's amazing that she can pull it off.
Yeah, it is actually a lot more into it than it looks like. It's just like shave it all off, but it's actually blended from here all the way down to skin. It looks kind of like skin on the camera, but it's really not. So it's actually, she is fading it from a very short to like really to like skin. So
that's what I tell people too. I mean, people always, you know, they don't always, but like, you know, people might comment on my receding hairline, and I try to explain to them that I've just always had a huge forehead.
I think it has gotten bigger though.
Well, but most assuredly, yeah. I grew into my hairline.
We've known each other for a long time, so. Man, so yeah, I mean, what's been going on with us? We haven't done anything for quite some time.
And we still, I mean, I don't know, it's probably not going to be out, but we do have like one more episode that we recorded pre-COVID.
Right.
That it'd be cool to get out, but it's just been kind of a weird, I mean, we've been in this weird place with everybody else dealing with that, and then having kids, and especially you with your son being super immunocompromised. Yeah. I can imagine it's been.
Yeah, that's definitely been tough. But I mean, you know, it's more honestly just the same thing that you're going through, just being like, you know, with the kids at home every day, all day, it's just hard to get stuff done. So
for sure. Well, and then for me, I'm still out of work doing my physical therapy, trying to recover from my injury that we discussed on the podcast previous. So I had the surgery very shortly before we broke for COVID, and then it's just been this long of just doing rehab and physical therapy, trying to get back to being a productive member of society, working on it.
Well, anyway, with everything that's been going on, I mean, you know, to kind of lead in, the reason we were going to release that last episode that we have, and we were kind of just at the point of getting ready to release it. And then, you know, everything happened with all of the like protests and everything starting after Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd. You know, obviously everything changed. You know, to a certain extent, the whole world kind of changed. You know, real quick overnight.
For sure.
And you know, we've always kind of wanted to start doing more conversations about other things as well, right? Because the majority of our podcast is just kind of like, you know, it's very like local Seattle music based, and other related industry, right? But we've always, you know, we're like really into other like political stuff and, you know, lots of other issues. And so we kind of wanted to expand it. And so we kind of decided that this would be a good time to do that and try to add more conversation without just adding more non-Black voices. You know, we didn't just want to hear ourselves talking more, but we wanted to try to start having more conversations, you know, with people as well. And so that's why we're having our guest today, who is someone that we've both known for a really long time. She is, well, I guess, how can we explain who she is to us?
Well, she was our teacher and at Seattle Central,
right?
In the drama department. I guess you worked with her longer than I did. You did quite a few productions with her,
right?
I only did the one, but founder of the Conciliation Project,
right?
Which I guess, I don't know. I feel like I kind of want to let her explain what that is. I feel like she's gonna, even if I try to explain it, I feel like she would correct me or do it better.
for sure, for sure. Well, she's a, she's a doctor, I believe in fine arts. She has she has a PhD in fine arts, and she's, been an actress and been involved with theater and teaching, and has worked for multiple colleges. And now I believe she's at VCU in Virginia. I think it's VCU. I'll have to double
It is VCU. I don't.
VCU. Okay.
I feel like I'm instantly like feeling like super unprepared. I'm like, what does the C stand for?
That's true.
But like in classic biggest tradition.
Yeah, we're just gonna ask.
We're just gonna ask and wing it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I guess anyway, we've studied under her, but she's much more than just a teacher. She's definitely been, at least for me, she was definitely a mentor, and working with her and the type of ritual theater that she does, I learned a lot about race-related topics, just from being in that theater department. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So anyway, and we were having a lot of these conversations that are, kind of prominent right now. We were having a lot of those conversations back when I was in her program, which was like 2001, 2002, I believe. And so yeah, it seemed like a good place to kind of start, because I felt like I became a lot more aware of things personally, just from that time period in my life. So it seemed like a good place to start. But obviously, like I said, we want to have these conversations and just try to move the conversation forward, right? Is that kind of how you're seeing it?
Yeah, I think it's important. Right now is a good time to amplify Black voices, and I think I can't think of anybody better than Dr. T to get some insight into, I don't know, what's going on and what we want to look towards now and in the future, as far as like what we, I don't know, as a nation want to do, like where we're trying to be. I mean, I learned a lot from Dr. T about just about the I guess the complexities of race relations, going back to Greece, and she talked about the even the history of ritual theater, like you were saying, and then all the way up until the current state. And I learned a lot about myself, and I got a real different perspective on the world through those classes I took with her. And so I don't know, in classic biggest fashion, like we just want to start a dialogue and tell a little bit of her story and talk about what's going on, and hopefully entertain some people, and some good edutainment.
Yeah, right. Edutainment, I love it. Shouts to Boogie Down Production.
Yeah.
I think that if I remember correctly, I don't even think that I was, at least personally, familiar with the phrase white privilege before I started working and having these conversations with Dr. T. And not that I didn't know that there was such a thing.
It wasn't put into a term for you, like. Yeah.
And I definitely wasn't hearing it in like mainstream conversations or anything like that at the time. So in the like, what has it been, 17 or almost 20 years basically since that time, the phrase white privilege and the concept has definitely become super mainstream to where it's like a huge deal now, and you know, people are having a really hard time accepting that it's real.
Yeah, some people are, for sure.
Yeah, some people, not everybody. But anyway, yeah. So Dr. T is way smarter than both of us, and so
No, definitely, she's a doctor.
Oh yeah, I felt like it would be a good idea to get her on, and yeah, hopefully be able to break some things down way more eloquently than I'm sure we can. So yeah. Are you oh, and there she is. You ready to bring her in?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Good.
There she goes. Welcome to the biggest podcast.
Oh my God, look at you. Hi, Joe. I've seen Mike.
Hey. Well,
in a while.
you probably unfollowed me on Facebook. You don't want to see me at my kids' posts anymore.
I might have unfollowed you. I don't know. I put out this message a couple of weeks back that said I was cleaning out my Facebook friends list, and I was clearing out all the white people who didn't talk about Black Lives Matter. Or who just talked about baking cookies or clipping flowers or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like
you still show up. You still show up in my timeline, so I don't think you unfriended me.
I didn't.
You just unfollowed.
No,
well,
but
Joe's
for some
definitely
people,
not one of
I
those
unfriended them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe definitely posts frequently about all kinds of stuff, and Black Lives Matter.
So,
definitely a part of that. So.
Yeah, we were talking about how I was being accused of virtue signaling before this show. So I don't know. I guess I'd have to ask your opinion, Dr. T, if you think my posts are virtue signaling. You'd have to go back through my Facebook and let me know.
Okay. I don't think so. So are you being accused of that by friends of yours or?
Yeah, I mean, more acquaintances, I guess, but like more online, like, you know, Facebook friends as they are, you know what I mean? It's really hard for me to see somebody post some BS and not say something when I see it. And so then I get accused within a thread of, oh, somebody came on to virtue signal or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, but I just have a hard time. I have a hard time, you know, I learned a lot from you, and we were talking about that in your intro before you joined on. And it's, I feel like it's my responsibility. Like, if I'm going to say that I'm an ally, to speak up when I see that BS come across my timeline or in a conversation, you know. So I speak up. At least I try to, you know.
Yep.
You know, just real quick before we get any farther into this, I think that, you know, if nothing else, we need to say, you know, welcome to Dr. Tawnya Pettiford Wates.
Welcome, Dr. T.
Are we on? Actually, are you recording now?
I'm recording this. It's not like going out live or anything, but
okay.
Yeah.
I had a fly that I had to get out of here because it would have driven me crazy.
Oh yeah. So, you know, normally, you know, I told you that we had, you know, talked about wanting to have you come on maybe sometime if you were in town or something, and that would have been really cool. And typically our interviews are kind of, you know, like, let's get some background on people, and you know, we try to tell a lot of their story, and that ends up taking up usually the first half, if not more, of someone's interview, and then, you know, we talk about what they're doing now and that kind of thing, and the majority of our guests are Seattle kind of music scene based people, either artists or, you know, music business, you know, related people. But so we definitely want to talk a little bit about, you know, you and your history, just to give some context. But then also, you know, another reason that we wanted to make sure and do this as soon as we could was so that we could try to have these conversations now because we want to try to help move the conversation and the dialogue forward, and give people some insight to things that they might not have been thinking about, or
Yeah.
So anyway, as I was just saying to Joe right before you popped on, is that we see you as way smarter than us, so we figured that you would be able to break things down a lot more concisely and eloquently than we probably could. So anyway, yeah. So we're real excited to talk to you and have you on. We definitely, like I said, we want to talk a little bit about your history, but then we want to also talk definitely about some stuff that's going on and keeping things going. So.
Well, I'm very, very excited to talk with you guys too.
Cool.
Like Joe, I don't know the last time I talked to you.
It's been a while. I think it was just a small text chat on Facebook or something like that, but that would be about the extent of it.
Mm-hmm. Now you're got kids and
Oh, I know. I'm a way different person than when I was your student. That's for sure. For sure.
I'm pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Just joking. So anyway, okay, so let's just give people a little kind of quick run through. I know from working with you and having conversations that you grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
Kinda. Yeah, my dad was in the service, so
Okay.
I think so. We moved to Harrisburg when I was 10, 9.
Oh, not till you were 10. Okay. Where were you born?
McKeesport, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. So another
Which
part
is
of Pennsylvania.
outside of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
40 minutes from Pittsburgh, kind
Okay.
of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't live there.
What branch was your dad in, Dr. T?
Army.
Okay.
And so I also have two siblings that my brother is Army and Air Force, and my sister Army. So they both went that way.
In that direction.
Yeah, so they could get their medical school paid for.
Got you. Oh, and then they went on to go to medical school after?
Well, they went to medical school on the whatever, is it the ROTC or the whatever?
The GI
they
Bill.
went while they were, then they give back, right?
Right.
Army or Air Force puts them through, and then they have to spend I think it's 7 years,
Oh, okay.
7 or 8 years, giving back at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what were things like growing up in that area at that time?
Well, yeah, that was in the 60s. And I always, I always tell my students, I love teaching because it keeps me current with now. It doesn't let me doesn't ever let me forget about the past, but it keeps me current with now. And I can also help students connect what is happening now to what was happening back then. Right. And so I always call the 60s it was a hellish decade. Mm-hmm. Because of all of the assassinations. It was like the hope, the glory, and the gore. I mean, it was we had the culmination, everybody thought, of the civil rights struggle being the Civil Rights Act. Right. And the Voting Rights Act, mm-hmm. and the Fair Housing Act, and all these acts. They were acting all over the place. But and so it gave people hope that all that struggle that came before then, and all that sacrifice that came before then, was actually coming to some sort of fruition. But then again, we also had, the assassination of Medgar Evers, the assassination of Malcolm X, the assassination of Martin Luther King, of John F. Kennedy, of Bobby Kennedy. And it was like, is it ever going to end? And then we also had, we had the riots of 67, in Watts and in Detroit. And then we had the one in 68 when they shot and assassinated Martin Luther King. we were, things were burning again. And it's very interesting because it was this time of year that is right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, April 4th, 1968 was when Martin Luther King was assassinated, right? So, of course, then that turned the spring into a tinderbox, a political tinderbox. And and then June, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated,
right?
And so it was like one thing after. So the summer blew up. I mean, it just blew up, and it's very interesting because last fall in what's that year? 2019.
Yeah.
I started getting. I felt. You know how I started feeling things in my body, triggers, language and lingo that I was hearing.
Reminded you of back then?
Yes. And I started feeling like, I said, I don't know. I'm just feeling like something's about to happen. I said, I'm hearing these same memes, this white supremacist language, which we didn't call it that. We didn't call it that then.
Right.
We have come to know that's what it is and what it needs to be called out loud.
Right.
We might have known what it was, but we didn't call it that out loud.
Right.
Like on
was there a name for it, or was it just the way?
Racism.
Was it just the But was it just the way it was? Kind of. I mean.
Yeah. It was racism, but we were very much. I mean, at least I was raised very much to believe that it was my right. Right. That someone was keeping me from my rights, that I had every right to have equal access and equal opportunity and equal. That's how my parents raised us. Now, that's not to say that we weren't living in some kind of magical thinking, We recognized what we were actually living in, but they taught me that the struggle was real and that I should never give up on the struggle. So, we just, it was racism, plain and simple. When I was growing up in that period, I got kicked out of my history class all the time. All the time.
For correcting the teacher?
Well, for not agreeing to just accept the history that she was saying. And I went
That's
to
what I mean.
I was the only Black girl in my class for all of middle school, right?
Okay.
So the 3 years we called it junior high back then.
Right.
And then, I was going to a private school with all white kids, privileged white kids, who were in total denial that anything was wrong. I mean, to them, we lived in America. To them, everybody could vote. Everybody could do this. Because that's what the law says, right? And they lived in a place that didn't intersect with with anybody that was outside of their own personal experience, class, and culture. So, except for me, I was their intersection, right?
So that's another question that I had was, what was the area like? Where you lived? Was it predominantly Black folks, or was it?
That's interesting, because first, when my dad first got out of the service, because when we were in the service, of course, we lived in military housing, right? And that's by virtue of military, it's already segregated. And I'm not talking about in race or color, because my father was an officer, right? He was he was a dentist in the service. So we always lived in officer housing, which then meant, again, we were one of the few, if not only, Black families, right? In wherever we were. And the enlisted men at families lived in a different part of the base, right? But it was still the base, and then we all went to the same school, basically. So, but then we moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when he got out of the service, and we started out living in the city, And so the neighborhood that we lived in would be considered middle class Black at that time, but it was in the city. And I went to a public school, which was the first time I had ever done that in my whole life, And
in junior high?
No, when we moved there, I was 9, so it was 4th grade. It was in the middle of my 4th grade year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have, the school was fundamentally deficient, right? So, I mean, it's in a Black neighborhood. So when we first went there, my mother came out of the side of the school and cried. And I didn't really know or understand why she was crying. It was just like this school was not what we were used to, on the military base. And, literally, I really did not have to do anything. And I got all A's,
Wow.
because my education was ahead of where my classmates were, at the time. And, we did that for 2 years. And that's when my mom, when I was about to go into 7th grade, because it was a half a year of 4th grade. When I was about to go into 7th grade, she was like, when I hadn't done anything for 2.5 years, really, literally. And, getting all A's, that's when they decided to put me in a private school.
Mm.
And that school was what we call across the river.
Oh, I see.
Right. So like
So
across
the other side of town.
There you go. It's like in Seattle, Redmond. Now I haven't been living in Seattle for 16 years now, but I'm sure it's still segregated. I'm
Redmond
sure.
is still Redmond. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's like going across the bridge to school. And those kids were, and I was kind of upset about that because I was alone. Like I had created a community with these kids in my neighborhood, blah, 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 and I was alone. And those people were not my friends that I went to school with. Right. I was just awkward. I was out of place. And my life was different than theirs. And so when I spoke about my life, I always hit resistance. I always hit denial. I always hit, that can't be true. Even though I'm telling them, this is true. This is what happened. They're always, but Mike, really, fundamentally, white people have always been doing that. Like, literally, because right now we have this whole wokeness happening in the country. Right. And, they're like, I didn't know this and I didn't know that. Right. And the thing is, we've been telling you this and that all this time. You weren't listening. You weren't hearing, right? But anyway, so my parents then moved us to a neighborhood outside of the city that was all Black, but that was middle and upper middle class. So it was literally a brand new development that Black people decided it's kind of like Black Wall Street, we need a community of our own, and we want it to be nice, and we want it to be, so that's where I lived my parents still live there. Now the neighborhood has changed because white folks live there now, but when we were growing up, it was all Black families, right? All Black families and intact whole Black families, all professionals, not everybody was a doctor or a lawyer, but professionals, people that own their businesses, for example, who had, who were contractors or, they did moving or whatever, it could be manual labor, but they owned the business. They owned the business. They had people working for them. So, and that was what the neighborhood was. It was it was wonderful. It was very affirming. And it was psychologically such an incredible place to grow up in for us, for all the kids.
And then where did you go to college after high school?
I went to Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
Right. So that's Pittsburgh. Right. But it's very interesting because Carnegie Mellon sits up on a hill called Squirrel Hill. Like it's right at the bottom of Squirrel Hill, which is a very affluent, or back then anyway, it was a very affluent Jewish neighborhood.
Okay.
You know, and down the hill from Carnegie Mellon was Oakland, and that's where Pitt was, the University of Pittsburgh.
Right.
You know, so the black kids were at Pitt, and I was at Carnegie Mellon. You know, so again, it was. But I was always down at Pitt.
Is Pitt a state school?
University of Pittsburgh. I think so. I mean, I think it's a public school. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But now at least it definitely is. It's hard to get into.
Oh, it's huge.
Know,
yeah.
Was it back then too?
I think so. I think they always had a high standard, but it was a way. You know, Carnegie Mellon was a private school, and Pitt was a public school, and so the tuition was like night and day, and all of that. You know, and the availability of scholarship and support and all that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were already into theater then before you? I mean, I'm assuming because you went to Carnegie Mellon for theater. I mean, it's a known theater school, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it more than just theater, or is it just theater?
Oh yeah. Originally, you know, it was it was called Carnegie Tech. So technology, you know,
it was like MIT or something.
Yes, it was like that. And it still is, actually. It still is like that. Because so there's the school, you know, there's the School of the Arts, you know, but then there's all the other technical aspects, which are very separate from the School of the Arts, but they're still in the same institution. Yeah.
Right. Cool.
But it's like an MIT.
Oh, that's cool.
So did you start theater much before college? Were you doing it in high school and like at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
just your whole life, or?
Pretty much, I think. I mean, when my mother said, you know, when I was very young, like 5, that was my first play, like when I was 5 at church. And I was the Christmas angel. And, you know, the angel that's supposed to say, behold, you know, behold in a manger, you know, and I kept coming on too soon. Like I kept saying it too soon because I was really excited to come on in my angel.
Steal the show. Yeah.
But that's when they knew. They were like, oh yeah, she wants, you know, she wants to do this. And so then my parents like provided me opportunities through community theater, through taking dance classes and, you know, all kinds of performing arts kinds of things because that's what I was interested in. So I did that all through, just all through growing up, actually. I used to create shows when I lived in the city, just like in 4th grade when I came there, I created shows in my garage. You know, we just, so we had garage theater, you know, we would turn stuff that was on TV into a play and do it in the garage. Right. Yeah.
So you got, when you first went to Carnegie Mellon, you just went there for like 4 years or?
Yes.
You just got a bachelor's degree first.
Yes, I got a BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts.
Bachelor of Fine Arts.
In acting and directing, yeah.
Right. And then after that is when you moved to New York?
Yes, so in my final year, first of all, in the final year, a group of us got together, a group of like some masters, some graduate students and some upper level undergrads got together and created a company. And then we put a proposal to the faculty that we wanted the seniors, we wanted to take our 4th year off and go on a tour with this company, which was called Theater Express. And that company's still in existence.
Really?
And in Wisconsin. But we created 5 pieces of theater and we toured them in college and to colleges and universities all over the country. And they gave us credit for our final year for doing that, you know. And then so while that was happening, For Colored Girls had hit Broadway. That was in like 76. And it had hit Broadway.
Like it just debuted. It was brand new.
It was brand new. Now, it had already done the development process. Like before a show gets to Broadway, you realize like it's alive, for a while, right?
Right.
So it had started in San Francisco in bars and cafes, just like with a couple of musicians and dancer and Entezaki herself as just the poet. So there'd be dance and this music and the poetry. So, it was like the first spoken word, stuff happening. And then a friend of hers saw it and said they should bring it to New York. And so they brought it to New York down to the Henry Street Settlement, which is also still in New York. And Woody King, who's a Black producer, at that time, he was like one of the very few Black producers. And he's down on the Lower East Side, Henry Street Settlement. And they add more women, they add more. It's not just Entezaki, it's other women doing the poems, and there's dancing and music. And then they ask a guy who studied at NYU with Israel Hicks. Remember Israel Hicks, Mike?
I'm familiar, but what was that?
He was the chair. He was the chair at SUNY Purchase, right, where a bunch of people from Little Theater off Broadway went.
Right.
And then he moved from SUNY Purchase and became the chair at Mason Gross Rutgers, right, at Rutgers School of Theater at the Mason Gross School, and a bunch of
people
Little
went there.
Theater off Broadway people went there too.
Right.
But
just to be clear for people listening, the Little Theater off Broadway was basically the theater department at Seattle Central, where Joe and I both studied with you. So.
That's right. And I think it's not. Is it still called the Little Theater off Broadway? It's called the Erickson Theater.
Yeah, it's called the Erickson Theater.
Yeah. But everybody that knows it calls it the Little Theater off Broadway.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, where was I? What was I talking about?
That Israel Hicks.
Why though?
The For Colored Girls thing, and then
yes, so Israel was a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon. That's where I first met him, actually.
Oh, so you already knew him.
Yeah, he was the only Black faculty member at Carnegie Mellon.
Right.
And so at the same time, one of the Black students from Carnegie Mellon had graduated and gone on to become a part of the Broadway company of For Colored Girls.
I see.
So of course, if it's somebody that and they're on Broadway, you want to see them, right? And so my whole goal was to go to New York when I graduated as a gift to myself, go to New York, see the show, see her, Risa Collins was her name, Lady in Purple, see her, and then come back to Pittsburgh and start my job, because I had a job with the Pittsburgh Public Theater I already had a contract for a whole year. So upon graduation. So anyway, I went up there to see the show, and I literally had an out-of-body experience, right? Where I saw myself on the stage. Like that had never happened to me in theater before. I saw myself on the stage doing that show. And long story short, my boyfriend at the time sort of did a dare where, I said, I'm supposed to be in that show. And he goes, why don't you call him up? And I was like, call him up. Right. Call up the New York Shakespeare Festival and Joe Papp and tell him that I want to be in For Colored Girls. I'm sure I'm not the only one that wants to be in For Colored Girls. So just kind of back in those days, we didn't have cell phones. So I had to go outside of the theater to a payphone. And I, dropped I think it was 10 or 15 cents and called the number that was on the playbill. because it's the New York Shakespeare
on the actual playbill. Yeah.
on the actual playbill.
Right.
And the strangest thing happened. The phone rang, and the person said, "New York Shakespeare Festival, Joe Papp speaking." Now, so for those people who don't know, Joe Papp started the New York Shakespeare Festival. Joe Papp started Shakespeare in the Park in New York. Joe Papp is like, he's like the Mount Rushmore of theater icon.
Right. Yeah.
And he answered the phone. And I was like, I was speechless for a moment. I got my breath very quickly and I said, "Hello, I'm an actor and I'm in town for just a few days and I would like an audition for Colored Girls."
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes, "Can you hold?" And he hung up, he put me on hold. And I was like, he's probably laughing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who calls and says, "I want an audition"? So anyway, the next voice I heard, the phone came back and said, "New York Shakespeare Festival casting. This is Rosemary Tischler speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you want an audition for Colored Girls." And I was like, "Yes." And she asked me a bunch of questions and I'm thinking I'm failing. Like I'm answering the questions and I'm thinking I'm failing. And then she goes, "Can you come now?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh my God, yes." And I hung up. And I didn't realize, like, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to, So I called back and she's laughing. She's like, "I guess you want to know where you're supposed to go."
Yeah.
I said, "Yes." And I told her I was not prepared for an audition. So I didn't have this is a no-no. This is why I always told people in my class, always have your picture and resume with you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. I didn't have, I wasn't planning on doing any auditioning in New York.
Right.
I didn't have on the right clothes. I didn't, whatever. She said, "We don't care. Just come now." And I went down there. She goes, the choreographer's here. She'd just like to see if you can move and whatever. So I came down there. I did that. They handed me the sides and they told me, "You'll read for the director on Monday." So that was on a Wednesday matinee. Because I went to the cheapest show, right?
Got you. Yeah.
I was on a Wednesday matinee. Worked all weekend, auditioned for the director on Monday. They called me Monday night and offered me the part. It just so happened somebody was leaving the show at the very time that I called the theater.
Right.
Right. And one of the things she asked me was, "Have you ever auditioned for the show before?" And I said no, because they didn't want to see anybody that they'd already seen. So I said no. And I thought that was a disqualifier. And it was actually the thing that got me in, that they hadn't ever seen me before.
Right. They were like, "Oh, good, a new face." Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, that's how I got in the show. They called me and offered me like big money. And I like basically was screaming inside, trying to act all nonchalant.
Right.
But they were offering me way more money than I had ever made before. And that's how I got to New York. Like I went back to Pittsburgh, packed up my stuff and moved to New York immediately and walked into a Broadway show.
That's pretty
What
good.
happened to your contract? Did you have to?
Oh yeah, I mean, I of course I called the people at the Public Theater. I mean, they can't compete with, it's like people know that if you get something better than what they have and they can't offer that to you, that you're leaving. I mean, that's kind of an industry standard,
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so how long did you stay in that? In that show?
I initially was in the Broadway show for a few months, and then they offered me a contract for the national tour.
The touring show,
right?
Yeah.
So and that was the first national tour coming off of Broadway, and we opened that at the New National Theater in Washington D.C. And then I was in it for 2 years, and then I was offered another contract that was a different tour. That went international, and then I was offered a third contract. So altogether, I did the show for almost 4 years, like 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. but the national tour I think was 18 months.
Okay.
And then a couple of shorter stints after that,
Right.
sort of.
Right.
Yeah.
See, this is all the great stories, and this is why our interviews turn into like mostly just like people's history.
But I thought I told you guys these stories before.
Oh no, I've heard that story. Plenty of times. I just you started telling it, and it's a good story, so I figured you just would tell it. It's a huge part of obviously your story, I think, right? It's a
right. Yeah.
turning point. Where you went.
A huge turning point.
Yeah.
I mean, we could speed it up and get do it the fast version if you want, or you could just say what happened next.
You've done lots of other stuff, but it's basically when did you go? What was next after that for you? Did you go and get your PhD then, or was that later?
No, it was later. So
Okay.
I'll try to like really condense it. So after I got off the road, like like really finally, like there were no more tours to do, right? So I came back to New York, and I had made a lot of money. I mean, I had been able to send my paycheck home the entire time. Wow. Because I was living on my per diem.
Per diem.
I mean, my per diem started out, and this is in 1977. Mm-hmm. My per diem started out as like something like $325 a week. And then it just went up and up and up.
Oh, yeah.
So that's not my salary. That's just my per diem.
Right. So you were just banking everything else. Yeah.
Yes, I was able to send everything else home. So I had quite a little nest egg. And the thing is, I just did small commercial and film stuff in New York after that. Yeah. And, basically, I didn't have to get one of those jobs that actors have to get. Like I didn't have to be a waitress or a barista or a cab driver or anything, because I had money to live on. And I started producing and directing, and I ended up getting invited to come to, first it was Minneapolis, a theater called the Mixed Blood Theater in Minneapolis, and I directed a production of For Colored Girls there. Like they wanted to do For Colored Girls, it was off Broadway, so now people can do it regionally around the country. So I directed that, and then the people in Seattle at ACT heard about that production, and they invited me to Seattle.
Cool.
And I almost didn't come because I was thinking it was California, because ACT Theater, American Conservatory Theater in California is what I knew. I knew ACT. I did not know that there was an ACT in Seattle. And at that time I was like, Seattle, where's that? People in New York don't know Seattle.
Yeah.
I mean, now they do, but back then,
Right.
And so I was like, I don't, and my friend said, you need to go. It's a regional theater. It's very well respected. Things can happen, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay. So I went out there. Long story short, it was a great production. I cast it from New York and, brought most of the cast except for one woman who was from Seattle was in it. And there's all these women, and we're staying on Queen Anne. And Queen Anne was very different this was in 1980. Mm-hmm. And it was very white and very old right then. And all these women were like, where are the people? They're like, we're staying on Queen Anne, and they want to know, like, are there any people of color in this town? Like, are there any Black people in this town? Where are the people? And so I met somebody in a store, and they said that a lot of the community lived in the central area.
Right.
And I'm telling the people at ACT, you guys have to connect with the Central area because we want some Black people in the audience. We don't want to do this show just for a bunch of white people. This is for colored girls, you know? And so anyway, they ended up, I said, and these women want to meet some guys. So, and so they arranged a party, like some kind of, you know, mixer. And the only time we had was on a Sunday afternoon because we were working, we were getting the show up, you know, so we only had Sunday afternoon off. And that's when I met my husband.
Oh, I see.
That party on that Sunday afternoon in Seattle. And that changed my life. 3 weeks later, I was engaged to him and we moved, you know, and I went back to New York and told them I was getting married. Nobody believed me, you know, and that's how I got to Seattle.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I was going to say that, you know, Ambra came pretty soon after that.
Yeah. She came a year, exactly a year. So she was born in 81. So, you know, a year after we were married, she was born.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you moved out here, then you stayed here
for 23 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what did you
I don't know. So you had, you know, moved on, you know, while I was at Seattle Central,
right.
you know, we had built a program there, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, people came there and it was a program. It wasn't just a class, right? It was a program. Stuff was happening and people were being sent all over the country to various schools. I mean, the people that came out of the Little Theater program went everywhere. They went to every major conservatory in the country. Right. And sometimes they even got scholarships to go there. Yeah. So it was pretty, you know, it was pretty happening thing. And this is all this time, I was still working part-time for Seattle Central. Mm. Right. And yeah, I'm putting in all this, literally I'm working for nothing practically. But I have a theater and we get to produce all of this stuff. So, you know, you know, fortunately I had a husband that had a good job and insurance and all that kind of stuff. So that helped. But eventually I kept pushing for more from Seattle Central. And they said, okay, we're going to make it a full-time position. But they go, you know, you don't have your terminal degree. And so when we open it up, we might have to give the job to another person. And I was like, I'll be damned if I built this whole thing and that's going to happen. No. Right. So that's when I went back to school to get my degrees, my terminal degree. I went to the Union Institute, you know, because I had all these students of color in my class and Stanislavski just wasn't getting it, right? Stanislavski, when I had a Filipina woman try to play a role as a white woman, because that's what she thought it was, you know, the whole masking, putting on those masks, you know, I said, I got to change up how I teach. I got to make these artists know that they can be who they are. Like that, if they're not, I mean, I don't want the same thing to happen to them that happened to me coming out of Carnegie Mellon, going up and auditioning for colored girls. And I didn't have my stuff because I could speak Shakespeare. I could do, you know, the classics. I could do all of this stuff, but I forgot who I was because for colored girls is in my own tongue. It's in my own language. It wants me to be my authentic self. So that was my research question. Where did theater come from? Mm-hmm. And what was it used for and why? And how did we get to this place where we are right now? Right? And so that's where all the work with the Conciliation Project came, you know, the idea of ritual poetic drama, you know, the idea that theater originally in its original form was meant to help people to see themselves in truth, to make a change and then move forward. Right. That it was supposed to challenge people's beliefs and challenge this and do. That's what it's supposed to do. So it was always supposed to be about social change.
Right.
right?
So
And
what year was it that you went back for your doctorate? Like, because you had already. I mean, by the time I got there, the conciliation project had already taken off. You'd already done Uncle
done
Tom Deconstructed.
So I graduated with my doctorate in 1994. So I started at Seattle Central in like 87.
Okay.
Right. So I had that was that was a while before before I went back to school. But I knew that I had to get the highest degree possible because these people were not going to give that theater that I built and that program that I built to somebody else.
Right. Right. So that was all then discovered from your research.
Yes.
For your thesis, basically.
Yes.
Okay. Because
I started examining and exploring my own education, my own training in conservatory, and how it was framed and that the structure of it was really a colonial structure. It was a colonized structure. It was because there were no practitioners of color that we studied, right? We did playwrights, we did plays, but I'm talking about the technique of acting, how you do it, So I realized that those questions that I had back then, I needed to answer them so that I could pass that on to my students. So that they didn't have to question who they were and what they looked like, and instead of bringing the power and the passion of who they were to the work that they did.
Right. So then, so that's not so. Basically, you did that, and then through that process, you kind of created this ritual poetic drama course. Which became a huge thing at Seattle Central. So, but that wasn't really that wasn't a thing then that other people were really doing.
No.
Okay. No. I don't think I ever really knew that. I just thought that was kind of known that was another form of drama that was, from, ancestors and stuff, but I didn't know that was kind of just like specifically only your thing. So that's cool.
Yeah. You guys were like guinea pigs, like I was literally experimenting,
making it up as you went along. Kind of.
Yeah. And then documenting it in my thesis, in my dissertation.
Right.
And now there's a book that's called Black Acting Methods. And it's the #1 seller of acting books on Amazon right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Your book?
Who did that?
It's edited. There are 10 practitioners in the book, right? Okay. I'm one of them. So my chapter is ritual poetic drama within the African continuum,
right?
; from Shakespeare to Shange.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the ritual thing, and then how that influenced the conciliation project that kind of started from that one of those ritual classes that I was lucky enough to be a part of. You were already doing the ritual class.
Yes.
I mean, you had already been doing the ritual class before I even got there. And even one of the first ritual show that we did that I was a part of was Gut Girls.
Yes.
Which was totally not, related to the conciliation project type of work, right?
Right.
Because it was about 1800s or early 1900s in England or something, right? And so then the next ritual class that I was a part of was when we started doing Uncle Tom and reading the Uncle Tom's Cabin book. And then from that, Uncle Tom Deconstructed was born.
That's right.
Right.
So the ritual, so that whole process that I developed during my doctoral studies, right? And it's found, the foundation of it is story and storytelling, which, you know, that's the foundation of drama, the story. And you know, we developed a process whereby we would go into a trance-like state using the drum, right? Using repetition, using physical and vocal moves that connected with certain emotions or emotional locations. And then, you know, we'd go on this journey, and then we would write about the journey that we took. And then we would share those writings, right? So it was basically that technique of accessing kind of your creative content through your emotional core, through your, you know, emotional center. And we did that as a community. And I was like, now it's time for us to create a piece of theater out of that process. And that's the class that Uncle Tom was in. I said, and we need time. So we created it out of a coordinated studies. I don't know if you know that, where we put, you know, there was an English teacher involved, and there was music, you know, music, theater, and English literature, you know. So we used Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, to interrogate Uncle Tom, right? And that was a question in my dissertation, like, who is Uncle Tom, or tokenism, right? Tokenism, right? And so this play that we created, we devised, we used that novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, as the basis or the foundation of the text, but we totally deconstructed it, totally took it apart, right? And I just remember the thing that sort of really spun, you know, started things spinning, was when I'm telling you, I think everybody was gathered in the lobby, and we were going over the syllabus, and we were talking about what we were going to be doing for the class. And I said, we're going to deconstruct this novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and da 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 da. And then Patrick Crowley, do you remember Patrick? Raised his hand, and he said, Dr. T, how are we going to do Uncle Tom's Cabin, and there's no Black people in this class? And at that moment, I guess the muse just dropped in. I said, we're going to do a minstrel show, right? And people were like, a minstrel show? What's that? I said, you know, somebody said, you know, you mean like with blackface? And I said, yes, except we're going to also have whiteface. So we're going to make minstrels from the white characters, just like white people made minstrels from the Black characters. And that's where the whole thing took off. And that was like a totally impulsive and improvisational take on it. Because I hadn't, you know, you can't ever tell who's going to, at least at Seattle Central, you couldn't tell who was going to show up for a class. And, you know, I wasn't going to change what we were going to do just because there were no Black people in the class. And actually, minstrelsy was created from white people, not Black people. So, it just all made sense. It just all made sense. And then it turned out to be such an incredibly powerful, I remember, we assembled the creative team, set costumes, whatever, created an actual minstrel stage. I remember Deb Sorensen, who was our costume designer. Oh my God, she created, the whole minstrel thing, mask and whatever. She researched the makeup. We did it to a T. And I remember the first time you guys got in that makeup and you walked into my office, it took my breath away. It was so powerful, those masks were so powerful. And that's what it did to the audience. That's
Right.
what it did to the audience.
Right. And also because not only were we doing that and, doing, it was such shocking imagery and the things that we were saying in the actual, the text, but then at the end,
Taking it off.
everybody takes their makeup off, and then you start seeing that all these people that were playing these super over exaggerated minstrel versions of black characters or white characters, that like the ones playing black characters weren't black, and were lots of different kinds of
People. Yep.
lots of different kinds of people. And so that was crazy. And it was if I remember, it was a very difficult journey for the white people as well, who were playing the white minstrel characters.
Yes.
To be able to kind of confront a lot of the, white privilege and racist things that may have been either ingrained in them or, just that they knew about, but it was hard for them to take it on themselves if they didn't believe it,
It was because they also were learning a history that they did not know, that, the whole history of how our country was founded is very much whitewashed. And, I know that's it was very much whitewashed, and slavery and all of that. And even in Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, she, who had never owned slaves herself, who had never really lived on a plantation, she had her own imagery. I remember one of the powerful things that I was told when I was doing my dissertation, because Angela Davis was one of my faculty. She did the section of my dissertation. She oversaw the section that was about social change and social justice. And she said to me, she asked me, like, I wrote that chapter on tokenism and Uncle Tomism, tokenism. And she said to me, I'll never forget it. She said, you realize that Uncle Tom is the creation of a white woman's fantasy. And I was like, oh my God, that's right. So in other words, here we are dealing with a character that isn't real, right? This is a fantasy. This guy is made up. And yet he has been co-opted culturally. He's a cultural icon, both, definitely in the African-American community. I mean, and if somebody is called an Uncle Tom, that's a pejorative, right? That's a slur. So here we are calling people in our community the made up version of what a white woman's fantasy is about Black people, right? I mean, it's just so messed up, right? So messed up. And so we peeled away. So that's how we came to the place of deconstructing Uncle Tom.
Right.
That's why the play became called Uncle Tom Deconstructed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I got to experience that as an audience member. So I remember I was, old friends with Mike from middle school, and then I saw that production, and then that's when I joined next year, and then I got to be a part of the next production, which was Genocide Trail.
Yep.
And I got to experience what you guys were talking about, just being putting on that white face and dealing with that side of it. And it was, I remember, I mean, a lot of people had a really hard time.
Yeah.
Dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was shocking still. And I learned a ton. I still have so many books on my shelf from that class that I got that I couldn't get rid of because, I learned so much.
Living, I mean, what I realized, like, as so part of this is what birthed the Conciliation Project. It's what when we moved on to Genocide Trail, I think we had already decided to become the Conciliation Project. Mm-hmm. And, the process of unmasking, of taking off all of that makeup and all of the clothing and then engaging with the audience in a dialogue became a signature part of the work. And that those were some of the most open and honest conversations that I had ever had with white people.
Mm.
But I realized in that moment, even though we had been together as a class community, we'd been working, together, blah, blah, blah. I realized that white people in our culture and in our society weren't used to being called white.
Mm.
Like they weren't used to having to identify with their whiteness. They always could identify, the black guy, or the Chinese
Right.
guy, or the, the Filipino guy, or the
Right.
Latino guy, or the whatever. But they were not used to.
They were just a guy.
Yeah, they were just the guy. Yeah. And that was the most uncomfortable thing, not only for the cast and the people who were creating it, but also for the audience.
Mm.
For the audience. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. Well, I was going to say, so, I mean, just to touch on the different productions you did with the Conciliation Project, I remember you talking about the future, but then you did Yellow Fever, right? Was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then was there a
Stolen land, border crossings, right?
Okay.
And all of these came out at really, like, I think Proposition 187 was what was being discussed in California at the time we were creating stolen land border crossings, and then we did a piece because I wanted to hit all the color groups, right? All the color groups that had to do with the historic legacy of racism and white supremacy in this country.
Right. Didn't you also deal with sexism as well?
Yes, that was the next one. Then global sexism. Global sexism, which definitely we need to revisit because now we've had the Me Too movement and all kinds of things have happened since then.
That'd be a whole other show now.
Yeah, and then when I moved to Richmond, I had a class that was a year-long class, and we created PIC, the Prison Industrial Complex, where race, class, and gender all intersect. And then a couple of years ago, we created with a theater company here, the Conciliation Project, with a theater company here in Richmond, a piece called Locked and Loaded, a story in parts and pieces, which is about gun violence in America and where that came from, and this whole Second Amendment thing.
And was that created with the ritual process as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So with these plays that you've developed, are you constantly rewriting your script? Like if you were to reproduce one of these plays, are you modifying the script and using the ritual process to add to it and take away from it?
Every time.
I mean, is there anything left from those original productions that carries on?
Oh yeah, always. I mean, the base, because they're all good. All of those plays are good because they were created. We call it now in the theater, the term is devised, right? Through a devised process that was a collaborative devised process. And there is something, the basic, because it's so specific, it's so universal. The basic play is the same. Uncle Tom, when Mike was in it, was 2 acts long. It was 2 acts. And we realized we can't have a 2-act play when we're dealing with racism because people won't come back for the second act.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right? So, and the whole point is they have to have the conversation. So we started, so we started to shrink them down into a full-length 1-act. So we try to make sure they're no longer than an hour and a half.
I see.
So that we can still have a half an hour of dialogue, right? Which that's usually people's limit of time that they can, sit. So, we realized that. So Uncle Tom was revised. Uncle Tom has been done the most out of all of the plays. And it's been revised several times. There's a part in the play, because all the plays also are written in cycles. There's always a prologue and there's always an epilogue. and then there's 7 cycles, right? So there's a cycle in Uncle Tom that is about hunting, the hunting of Black bodies, runaway. He's, because from the novel, George, the character George, ran away. So we're doing the whole running away, and then we have the slave catchers looking for the runaway slave, and we translated that into police. So it starts off as the slave catcher, then it turns into the police, like the modern day blue shirt, badge wearing police, because that's where the police came from. They came from the slave catchers. That's the evolution of the police, and more. And then we have more people running from the police, and then we have, the cold-blooded murder of a Black man, and then we play a tape of "I Can't Breathe," right, where it's the literal Eric Garner tape.
Oh, the actual audio?
The actual audio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we're doing, so these are the things, like, we stay current with whatever.
That's an update. Yeah.
Yes. The problem being, why do we have to still, why is it still current, Joe? That's the problem.
Well, it's so current that now you have another audio that you can use, right?
Yes.
With George Floyd.
Right.
Yes.
So,
right.
it's like now you have more to choose from. Yeah, and it's and then there's people who are hearing like you said, the wokeness that we're experiencing, right? This new wokeness, and there's actually people who are asking, like, wow, has it really been this bad, or has it always been this bad, or is it just? I think it's just because we have tapes and we're getting it. You know what I mean? Like no, it's just because we have this modern technology, we're allowed to capture it, and still only a sliver of it. And yet you have to imagine, you can't help but imagine all the times that aren't recorded, that well before and throughout the last 400 to 500 years.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a huge burden that we all share.
Yes.
So what are some of the conversations that you've been having? Because I've been it's so, just knowing that we're still having these same conversations now is just so exhausting for me. And just thinking about how long you've been having them, and then how long other people older than you have been having them. It's just like, why do we really need to spend time talking about whether Black Lives Matter? And it's like, yes, we do, but it's just, it seems so silly that we even have to really keep bringing this up.
Yes.
But obviously, it hasn't been changed. So.
That's right. I mean, Uncle Tom Deconstructed is as relevant today as it ever was when we did it for the very first time in 2001, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been, it's like, it is exhausting. It is exhausting. I mean, so remember, I started telling you about the school I went to where I was the only Black girl in my class. And, that these kids were negating my experience. That couldn't happen. I'm telling them that we live in America, but there are people who cannot vote right now. There are people who cannot vote. And they're telling me that couldn't be true because of the law and because of the Constitution and because of the, I'm like, well, okay. So I'm telling you, this is my experience, right? But so that's when I was 12, 13, right? So I'm saying that, and people are negating the experience. And that's what white people have done throughout the centuries, throughout the decades, throughout the, this Tulsa massacre, that has been in the history books for, but it wasn't, it's never been taught. We knew, Black communities knew, we knew about Juneteenth. We knew that even after the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery was not over.
Right? Everybody didn't hear about it yet.
Yeah, we knew that,
Right.
So it is, to answer your question, I mean, it does get exhausting. And but I can't stop teaching and sharing the information, because what I've seen is that even though I might have sometimes thought the things that I said people were not receiving them, they didn't, value them or take them in, they did. And so I now have a lot of people who I have been pouring into, who are now vocally also pouring into people. And that's how it changes. And now we've got young people in the streets. In Richmond, I live in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy.
Right.
For 10 years, literally, I kid you not, for 10 years. So since 2010, they've been having commissions and panels and committees about what to do with the monuments. Guess what? In 1 week, those young people went out there and started knocking those monuments down. So now we don't have to worry about what happens to them, because now they're down.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, but it took, so I'm saying, so the seeds that I planted and the energy that I put into people, it's all beginning to bloom and blossom right now, So this is not the time. This is not the time to give up or give way. It's the time to push harder, push harder.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have you heard much about what's going on in Seattle with the CHOP, the Capitol Hill Occupied protest?
Yeah.
Have you been paying attention to that?
It was on the news, and I was like, oh my God, that's right where the little theater is. That's like Capitol Hill,
Yeah.
And
like 2-3 blocks away.
What did you say?
Like 2-3 blocks away is it's right up Pine. Yeah.
Yeah. And my daughter sends me a text, Ambra, who lives there in Seattle. She sends me a text. She goes, Mommy, come get your students. What is it? The autonomous zone that they call it?
Well, it started out as the autonomous zone, but they renamed it Capitol Hill Occupied Protest So they went from Chaz to CHOP. CHOP is the current nomenclature. If I'm using that word right. I'm trying to sound smart like you, Dr. T.
Chaz to CHOP. Yeah.
I like CHOP. CHOP better. CHOP's better. It sounds better, I think.
I've been watching it and just wondering, what are they doing? What are they doing? That's my thing is, what's the point? Like, because right now I am ready for actual reparations. Do you understand? I'm ready for actual deliverables, policy. Okay, this is the ask. This is what I want. So how are you going to give that to me? And I'm not, because I've been protesting forever. So now I'm ready for the deliverables. And so that's what I'm wondering about these guys up there. What are they asking for?
Well, I think there are demands, but the CHOP itself, as far as I understand it, I think it basically started when that was the standing ground between the police and the protest was right there. And then when the police evacuated that precinct, that's when they occupied that area. But it's been ever changing. It's been kind of fluid. And so there's a lot of different people there now with a lot of different ideas. And a lot of people are saying, like, is this really a Black Lives Matter protest at all?
Exactly.
And from what I've heard, the Seattle Black Lives Matter is not even like technically connected to the CHOP.
No, but some of the organizers are. I saw an interview with some young Black men who were two of the organizers there. So, there is a presence of Black voices there, but there's just so much. It's gotten really convoluted, and there's just so much going on. Yeah. It's kind of turned into a little bit of a homeless encampment too. In order to keep it occupied, they have constant. I did go visit it for a very brief amount of time. I wanted to show my kids what was going on. So I brought them down there to show the memorial at the precinct and to see the artwork and just to get it, spark some dialogue with my kids about it. And so, and they have like a whole section of homeless encampments, and they have protesters tents. So I don't know. It's just, I couldn't explain it, what's going on, but it is interesting. Yeah, for sure. Right.
I mean,
And I don't think anybody there can either. And I know that there's local people that are of multiple different, backgrounds that are against it and for it, so it's a very convoluted and complicated thing.
Yeah. My concern is that it seems like, when the protests were happening and the police were still there, the focus seemed very clear. And it seemed like, there were specific demands and everyone was talking about defund the police and all, a couple other things that were like the main things. Let's get this accomplished right away. Mm-hmm. And since the police left and it's turned into the chop or whatever, I just feel like it's been very distracting from the movement. You know what I mean? And so I feel like a lot of that conversation has been lost and turned into now the news is only just covering the chop and no one's even talking about all the stuff that was actually getting talked about when the protests were going on. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So, and there have been many protests. So they had a children's march starting at Garfield that went by the juvenile correction facility and then to Bagley. There is that Bagley, the elementary school there in Yesler.
Yeah.
And that was powerful and that was great and then there was the Juneteenth protest. There was another protest in the Central District, and
right.
But again, it's like, as far as what the chop is or what's going to be gained from that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But I feel like the city doesn't know either. They're kind of they can't even agree on why they left the East Precinct. Why they evacuated. Nobody will admit to making that call.
I'm not gonna. The thing is, I do not want my colonizer to tell me what's what. I want to tell them, right? Mm-hmm. I want to tell them this is what's what, and this is what you need to do, right? These are the things that we need. Like I have been about the abolishment of the prison industrial complex for a long time, ever since we did the PIC. Like because of the research that we did. And this is before Michelle Alexander's film or book, The New Jim Crow, in the age of mass incarceration, and before Ava DuVernay's film, 13 came out. But because that system is just the new plantation. I mean, it just is. It's just the new plantation. And all of these supposedly laws, I mean, if you can take the Voting Rights Act and then you can take out a section of that act and no longer enforce it, which then throws that state back into where it was before the voting right. I mean, what is the point of the act? They're going to have to do something more than that. And what happens often is that movements get co-opted by other people. And in a place like Seattle, where they're all this, easy breezy, whatever, patchouli, whatever, natural, hemp and that and the other. And,
the neo-hippies, yeah.
Yeah, you just, wait, what is the focus? Like, what is the focus and what is the ask? And what do we want the city to do? What do we want them to do? Because the protests happen because of oppression. Right? Because of this, because of the system. So how do we dismantle the system so that everybody can live, so that everybody can breathe, so that,
well, there has been some good things brought up. I mean, I know that they've definitely, there's heavily discussed topics of defunding police, and there has been people at least, but it's hard to know what's being vocalized in rooms that matter. But at least like on Twitter, you're seeing, somebody pointed out, like Jenny Durkin, the mayor of Seattle, is making these claims about wanting to help the people. And then somebody pulled up her budgets and how the Seattle Police Department budget has been raised by like 60 million just in the 3 years that she's took office,
Wow.
So,
crazy.
That money could have gone to things that would have benefited the community much more than, having, the protest was for it started 25 days ago. It doesn't seem like they ever ran out of tear gas. You know what I mean? Like, how do they have this much stockpile of these kind of weapons? You know what I mean? Like, that's a real issue. Why do they have this tremendous stockpile of weapons only to use on citizens?
Right.
What? Because what else are these weapons for? Right. So, I think some things have been brought up, but it is like it's a question of momentum. And now that that's kind of tapering out, what's really gonna be the long-term effects of all this? You know what?
Yeah.
You know, you wrote about that too in your column about, you know, when the temporary wokeness. I don't remember how you phrased it.
Yeah, I forget.
I read
what
your column though.
Yeah, the one this week is something about the myth of the apple, the myth of the one bad apple, right?
Yeah.
And you know, the thing is,
the saying goes, the bad apple spoils the bunch, right?
Yeah, that, and also, you know, an apple is connected to a tree, right? It didn't get there without the tree. So
Right.
the tree is the issue, not the apple.
Yeah.
Right? You know,
Yeah.
it didn't just happen.
Right.
Yeah.
You fire a couple of police officers, that doesn't fix the problem.
No,
Yeah.
at all. You know,
And also like you fired them because you caught them. What about the ones you haven't caught yet? Like, just because the existence of one proves the existence of many more.
exactly. It's kind of like you can't have one roach. Like if you have one roach, there's a lot of roaches.
You got roaches. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or one flea.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
It's an infestation, clearly, right?
So I just reject all of that. It's like the whole thing is based in white supremacy. It's based in power and privilege. It's based in the mandate to control and dominate Black bodies. That's where we got what now has become the modern day police force.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Control and domination. So, you know, we got that has to change. I mean, I've been working with some people on the West Coast. And it's not to say that this is only centered in the West Coast. That's just where I intersected with it, in the Oakland area, about restorative justice. And restorative justice practices, you know, this is about abolishing the prison industrial complex and replace, you can't just like have nothing, you got to put something there. And restorative justice practices engage communities in their own policing and in their own, you know, restoration process, you know, and that's about people who have committed harm and people who have been harmed coming together, right? And bringing that out in the open and dealing with it. You know, you can't, this whole thing of locking people up in these, you know, I mean, it's just inhuman. It's just, you know.
Yeah.
Got to do
totally.
something.
I just saw, you know, I watched the most recent John Oliver, and it was talking about COVID in the prison system. And there was an inmate who exposed his prison with a cell phone that he wasn't supposed to have, but he wanted to tell the story and show what was really going on. And so they put him in solitary. He's been in solitary since April. And they even said, we'll let you out if you apologize and say that you made it all up. You know, so what's that going to solve? Who's that going to fix anything? It's just, you know, it's just them covering their asses again.
Yeah.
Put the worms back in the can. Yeah. Are you still connected to very many? Sorry, Joe. Are you still connected to very many people in Seattle that are, you know, doing that kind of work or anything at all?
Yeah. So there's a group right now. When you were in the Wiz, Mike, who was the good fairy, or Glinda? Do you remember? Was it Heather? Heather, I forget what Heather's. Was it a blonde woman or was it a Black woman?
I can't remember.
You don't remember. He doesn't remember the difference between a blonde woman and a Black woman.
Yeah,
I guess
right.
a Black woman could be that.
I don't even remember the character.
Because we did you, yes, I think you were, because you were like Michael Jackson, like you were the Scarecrow, you were like Michael Jackson.
It was kind of like a James Brown, Michael Jackson mashup.
Yes, James,
Little
yes, it
Richard.
was.
Little Richard,
Yes.
yeah.
And then the guy, the person who played the Tin Man was like Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, right. Dennis.
And then the lion was like Prince. And then I think that was Tim Cook. And then I think
it was Nick. It was Nick.
Oh, it was Nick. It was Nick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then
and then Michelle was Dorothy, right?
Yeah, Michelle. Yeah. So anyway, because there's some people who were part of that who are still part of the Conciliation Project, and then there's a new group of people that came in after you that are there in Seattle. So now since we all locked down because of COVID, we're all doing Zoom. So it's like as if we're all together, even though we're all across the country. So.
Mm-hmm. I was just curious if you knew about or if you had ever met Nikita Oliver. You know who that is?
No, I don't think.
She's an artist, a spoken word poet, but also she ran for mayor against our current mayor in the last election a few years ago. And she's a Black woman from, where's she from, Joe? I can't even remember.
From Indiana.
Indiana, yeah. Anyway, she's been a very strong voice during all these protests. I mean, she's just always has a strong voice for political action and activism and stuff in general. But what she does for her day-to-day job is also like a restorative justice program she's involved in as well. So that's why I was curious if you knew her, because I think that would be a good connection for you guys.
I would love to connect with her. Maybe I'll get like the people who are working with TCP who do live in Seattle to connect with her.
Yeah.
She's we had her on our show too. Right. It was a great interview.
Yeah.
Restorative justice is hard work. It's hard work, but the alternative is, more of the same, which we can't deal.
Yeah.
Which has gotten us here, which is like, where's, this isn't anywhere. Right.
Where are we?
That's one thing. That's one thing that I think I got an email a week or so ago from the Seattle School District. And because of all this stuff that's been happening and all the newly awakened people that are like, oh, this is an issue. The Seattle School District decided that they're not going to have police in schools anymore.
Yes.
They have a long-lasting relationship with the SPD, and they decided going forward that they're not going to do that anymore. So because it basically was part of the issue that created the school to prison pipeline. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
So that was something that was pretty cool to see. And
they need to come out of all schools. There shouldn't be any police in schools. Period. Yeah.
So
for sure.
Yeah.
I saw my old security guard on Facebook, and he's like friends with Costa. I was like, I'm not gonna friend that guy. I wasn't even a different person then, though. Before I met you, I was a different evolution of me and my journey in this life.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Dr. T, if you don't mind, how did the ritual work translate to the East Coast and to Richmond? Like you said, the home of the Confederacy. I'm really curious how your work was received there, at least initially, compared to neo-hippie, faux progressive Seattle.
Yeah, that is because I don't know whether you were one of the, because I'm kind of thinking that we did Uncle Tom again.
Yeah, we did it twice. I was part of it twice.
You were part of it twice. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we left Seattle, right? Because I know that did you go with us down to Miami when we were part? Did you go to New York?
No, and I think you even did it maybe like a third time. I did it 2 different times, right? And they were real close to each other. And then I think you maybe did it later after I was gone, and that's when you were going to those places.
Because at one
like a drama festival, right?
Well, we took it to, we were the keynote address at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in New York City.
Oh, that's
So
right. That's right.
So we did Uncle Tom in New York City. They put us in this penthouse and everything. It was something. But
it wasn't Trump Towers, was it?
No. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Trump Tower. Oh God. Anyway, why was
Sorry, I have to be the comic relief. That's my
You
role.
asked me, Joe, you asked me a question about
I was asking sorry.
So when they hired me to come to Virginia Commonwealth University, I was not looking for a job. I was happy in Seattle. You know, the company, we were, all things were working. They had just put multi-millions dollars into renovating the little theater and creating this whole thing. And then all of a sudden they're calling me from Richmond and asking me to come. Now, while we were in New York doing it, and when we did Uncle Tom another time, I said to the company, this is great doing this work here in this progressive haven that we're in, but what if we took it to the capital of the Confederacy? Like, I just said that out, just like, it's like, that's where we would see whether, people could really handle the conversation, right? And, I just let it go, blah, blah, blah. So the call comes in 2004 from Richmond, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And so long story short, I tell everybody, people are pretty upset that I'm going to take this job and leave. But I said, the company can continue, right? I can come back. I can, give it to you guys to keep going, whatever. And they let that go initially, but then an entire cadre of people, like literally 12 people from the Conciliation Project, all came to Richmond, Virginia, right? And about 10 of those 12 actually enrolled at Virginia Commonwealth University in the theater department. So, So initially what happened was nobody was talking about race and racism like this in Richmond, Virginia. I when I did my interview and all that, I wasn't really looking for the job. I wasn't trying to be something I wasn't. I told them exactly who I was. I told them what I was interested in. I told them that the only reason I really wanted to come to Richmond was because of the history that was in Richmond, and because there was a significant African-American population, unlike Seattle. Like there's 60, I think Richmond is 60-something% African-American, right? And I said, I would really like to do this work I do there in that kind of space. And boy, the powers that be were pissed, right? I mean, so to answer your question, the students loved it. Like when we did the work for the students, more students wanted to be involved in it. Like, that's the work I want to do. And some of those students are still with the company today, even though they've graduated, and they're still doing work with the company today. But the powers that be, the administration, all of a sudden, I think they started looking at me like as if I was Malcolm X. They they immediately wanted to like squash me, and so they attempted to block my tenure, which the only reason I came, because I had tenure at Seattle Central. So the only way I would come to Richmond is if I could bring my tenure with me, right? So they agreed that I would have what's called an expedited tenure process.
Right.
which basically means all they have to do is check your credentials and make sure you're not lying on your resume, and get some feedback from people, whatever, and then you got it. But that's not what they did. Like they started trying to sabotage me, started trying to create dissension amongst the students, started to like file false reports, started to do all kinds of stuff that clearly made it feel like the entire department is against me, right? And ultimately they send me a letter and they say, you're not going to get tenure, you have 18 months because we're not going to renew your contract. So, at the end, so in all of this it's about the work I do. It's about them
being uncomfortable with the conversations.
They're not comfortable with the conversation. They're not comfortable, and like I said, I was upfront. It's not like I hid what I was doing, right? So I was about to leave. Like I started applying for some other jobs in other places. I got on the short list for every place I applied to. So I interviewed at Boston and they gave me the job on the spot. Joe McLaughlin went there, and Danielle Spotsville and Matt Peterson, Boston University. And they talked about me, and of course the people there love them, and they want to know who taught you, because we'd like to have that person, So when I got up there, they basically offered me the job, and I was in turmoil because my daughter was getting married. I had just bought a house. All these things were happening, and I just told them I couldn't take the job right then. And they said, we'll hold it for you for a year. Right? So Boston wanted to hire me, another school, UVA, I was on the short list there. I was on the short list at North Carolina. And so I saw that I could, that there were I was not used to being someplace where somebody didn't want me. Right.
Well, it's funny. All these places you're naming sound like places where the students might really appreciate the work, but the administration, not so much. You know what I mean?
Right.
These all sound like the same. It would be the same story no matter where you went.
Yeah. So anyway, my mom said, you didn't come to Virginia to leave. So if you want to leave when you want to leave. Yeah. Don't let them tell you when you have to leave, basically. Right. And she said, she said, you basically came there maybe to fight a battle that somebody else can't fight because they don't have your voice or your credentials. So at that point, I was like, okay. So I just, I filed an appeal. I got an attorney. I did all of these things. And, basically they had to relent and give, because it was about the department and in particular, the leadership of the department basically being afraid of me and them not being able to tell me. I told them before I came, I said, are you inviting me to your party and you want me to wear your clothes? Or are you inviting me to your party and I get to wear my own clothes? Yeah. I said, because I don't want to wear anyone else's clothes but my own. Yeah. So if I have to wear yours, I don't want to come to the party. I basically said that. I don't want to come to the party. They were like, oh, no, we want you to do this, that, and the other, just to get me there. And then when I came, I guess they thought they could change my clothes, but they couldn't. Yeah. So anyway, it was it was very, very difficult. But I can tell you that now the Conciliation Project is in high demand here, particularly right now. Right. Yeah. I mean, right now, they want us to help them talk. They want us to identify for them what are the systemic and institutional problems that need to be addressed. They want
at the school. At the school.
Both. Yes, at school and in the city and everywhere. Yeah. I mean, they literally. Of course, now we have a new chair. So the other chair gone, right? So this is a new chair. And she basically said, can we rewrite that story that how you came here? I said, we can't rewrite the story. but we can create a new one, right? We can create a new one because that story is part of this history and this legacy. So, yeah.
Oh, but she was being very conciliatory.
Yes.
Not coming in as like this new boss that's going to be hard ass or anything. Like
no.
Yeah,
Very, very open to, you know, and now particularly given the historic moment that we're in,
right.
You know, actually saying, I want you to call us out when we do this, that, or the other. And I said, okay, you open the door because I can't keep from calling out.
Yeah.
No.
And I'm good at that. Yeah.
I feel like that alone. I feel like there's something there. I mean, I haven't experienced a moment like this that we're in my life that I can remember. I felt like Mike and I both went to very progressive alternative Seattle school system, and benefited from a lot of things, including the Seattle attempt at desegregation when they were busing kids all over the city. So we had a really diverse group of friends and had a lot of exposure to a lot of things that just, I had a lot of exposure to a lot of things that just a lot of white kids my age didn't have exposure to because of that. And just because of we actually were into hip hop and listened to lyrics. And so we got those reports from those voices too, we listened to what they were saying. But the level of corporate attempts at wokeness these days, it's really just, it's weird. I don't know. And I can't blame you for not trusting it either, because it does seem like just pandering to it to a certain extent,
Right.
It is. But so I have decided that all these statements that people are making, they make public statements, organizations, store chains, businesses, universities, colleges, whatever, making these statements. I have decided that I am about to call them out on their statements. So if that's your statement, if Black Lives Matter, okay, then how about this? How about, this, and this? I'm going to actually do some asking because you said Black Lives Matter. And if they matter, then this is what you need to be doing. Right? Mm-hmm. Now's the moment to do that. Right. Because we can't go back. No, we can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. And everybody in the whole world saw them lynch George Floyd in the middle of the street in broad daylight with impunity, as if nothing was going to happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. With their hands in their pockets.
That's right. As relaxed as a cool breeze on a summer day.
I avoided that video intentionally. I've seen enough of those things, and I didn't I'd see it and I'd scroll by, and then it came up enough times where I caught pieces of it, and it's just it's so disgusting. It's so gross, and just like you say, they're the air about those police, that the way they carry themselves with such nonchalance, the horrible thing they're doing. It's just it's mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. Which, Joe, is a throwback to lynching. Mm-hmm. Lynching was public in broad daylight on a Sunday, with people, with their kids, as if this is a trophy hanging from the tree, taking pictures, putting their names in the newspaper. I mean, they didn't always wear the sheets, so.
And just with the work, speaking of the prison industrial complex, and with the work that's been done by the Innocence Project, and the dramatic number of people that are exonerated through DNA testing, just proving how false it is. I mean, there's that movie that just got released, Just Mercy, which is a true story. I saw a man on America's Got Talent. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you see that man performance? I mean, you can find the YouTube clip, and he just got released after serving 30 some years, maybe it was 40, since his 20s for raping a woman that he didn't touch. He never touched the woman. And he just got freed just because they finally got enough people to do a DNA test and just prove it couldn't have been him. It's just, and so like, I want to, like, when are we going to start to see, people actually denounce the death penalty and, stuff like that, those kind of things are things that I look forward to seeing soon, but I don't know.
Well, there's all these white boys making money corporately off of marijuana sales.
Oh yeah.
And there's all these black and brown bodies in prison today
Right. Yeah.
because of having marijuana on them.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
I mean, they all need, all that has to go. All of that has to go.
I mean, all the states that it's already legal in, that should, I mean, you would think that in theory that should be like, okay, well, all those people that are in those states should automatically get let out then, right?
Yep.
Well, I think Washington State at least has promised to do that, but I don't know if they've actually gotten the ball rolling on it. I know that they've committed themselves to like wiping everybody's record. And I think I heard the same about New York and California, but I don't know if all of them
about that too, but they probably got to do a commission study first.
Yeah, but see, there you go. And then the other thing is we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We're in the middle of a health crisis where those people are sitting in petri dishes in those. So maybe they will get released before they die in the prison.
Right? Well, and speaking of the Voting Rights Act, that's something I heard was that in Kentucky, Mitch McConnell is in a lot of danger because he's got some real strong up and comers trying to take his spot, and they've closed so many polling places. They're using COVID as an excuse
usually, and then they brought it down to 300 or something like that. Or
I mean some
30
tiny number,
down to 30,
Yeah.
30
and from 3,700.
And of course all the ones that in primarily the districts of color, not the white districts, right? Of course.
I mean, it's right out there in front of our faces. I mean, they don't even care.
Well, and I'm not even confident that Trump's going to lose in November. I know.
Because it's such a nightmare that we've been living. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's been
worse, and he still might,
Well, and that's the other thing. It's like the amount of the way that he's forgiven for all of his dog whistle, all of his racism and his dog whistle statements, and the way that people can talk themselves in circles to defend him and act like, oh, it was just a joke, or try to flip it around and say something that Obama did that wasn't perfect, or you know what I mean? It's just like they still can't get over that. It's just the ugliness that it's revealed. And then again, with all that ugliness that's been revealed and all that white supremacy and all the Proud Boys and the Tiki Torch marches, there's still people making excuses for it, and it's to this, and like a large portion of America is not.
One of my big pet peeves is the church. White evangelicals.
Yeah.
That to me, they have disqualified themselves.
Yeah.
Disqualified themselves from Christianity, basically. At least the Christianity I know about, the Bible that I have read, they're disqualified.
Right.
Yeah. Locking kids in cages and separate them from their families and all that stuff. I mean,
So how can you be about pro-life when you can
not about life,
when you can take kids away from their parents, when you can lock them in cages? I mean, even today, those babies are still down there at the border, separated from their parents, and some of them might never be reunited with their parents.
They have no way. They just don't have a way to find to reconnect these families. They don't have enough information on these people. They're undocumented, so they just have no way of reconnecting.
It's just done. Yeah.
I mean
that's not even the ones that are missing. There's kids missing.
Yeah.
So who knows?
And just think of all of the abuse and sexual violence that's going on with those kids right now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The missing kids, like with the sex trafficking and all this stuff, these kids are just gone.
Yeah.
And who knows? Lord knows where. It's just disgusting.
I mean, we should be brought up the human right, the Hague. I mean, these are crimes against humanity we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible.
Yep.
It's horrible.
I saw you, having some back and forth with a couple different people when you posted about the evangelicals the other day. And, we didn't really fully touch on the name of the Conciliation Project, but it kind of connects to what you were talking about as far as the evangelicals. And, a lot of people were kind of going back and forth with you about like whether this was the right way to come at them or something. And, and basically you were just kind of, reiterating things that are a part of the Conciliation Project mission statement, which is, I guess maybe you can just explain better what it is, but about the conciliation and the reconciliation part.
Oh yes. So, Christianity like has the mantra of that man is fallen, humankind is fallen, and that it needs to be reconciled to God. Right. Which is, part of, that's what the blood of Jesus is about, in Christendom. But we, according to the Bible story, we were once together with God, right? That God and man lived together in harmony and peace. So there was a relationship that got broken, right? The relationship got broken. When you start talking about Black people, African descended people, we have never been together with white people. We have never been together. We have not had a relationship that is not about domination and control and supremacy. So we can't reconcile because we have never reconciled in the first place.
Right.
We have never been together, so we can't re-come together. That's for people who have already had a relationship.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't had a relationship. So we have to recognize that we're coming from a place of hostility, that we're coming from a place of trauma. We're coming from a place of rape and murder and bondage and enslavement. We're not coming from a relationship, So that's why, that came in a long meeting. That's how the Conciliation Project was born, in a long meeting where, like, what could be the name of this project? And, and I used to say this to the students that, it sort of came to me in a vision that the reason that we have a race problem is that we've never reconciled our differences. We've never come together. So we're trying to do it wrong. We're trying to reconcile when we've never reconciled, and that's why we're still here 400 and something years later, like kind of in the same spot. There's been cosmetic changes. Like with a fishbowl. With a fishbowl, you put fish in it, the water gets dirty, you take the fish out, you change the water, but then you put them all back in the same bowl.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the bowl. Let's get rid of the bowl. Right? The bowl is messed up. I don't want to be in it. Yeah. Can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So I'm not up for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission like they had in South Africa. I can tell you they didn't change anything in South Africa. I've been there. It's still messed up. All, the poverty and lack of education and lack of ownership and lack of, white people still own everything.
Yeah.
White people still have the economic power, the education, so the distinction between white and black people are still the serving class, so it's not changed. It's cleaned up a little, right? So apartheid is not legal.
Right.
Just like we've got the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
But they lock people out of the voting booth. They line them up for, so what is that real? Come on.
Yeah.
The bowl's messed up. We need to smash the bowl. Yeah.
There it is.
Can't keep putting water back in there. It's going to just get filthy again.
Yeah. So what are you, what's coming up for the Conciliation Project right now?
We're about to launch, a Zoom workshop schedule, right?
Okay.
Where people can connect with us on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also, we've been in residence at a theater company here in Richmond, and we're about to merge with that theater company so that we'll have our own theater in Richmond, our own building facility, to do the work. And we're going to create, we've done the black play, the red play, the yellow play, the brown play, the sexism play, the industrial complex play. So we're about to do the white play. So we're going to create that. Yeah. I think we're going to call it white-splaining. And so where those intersections are, so we're about to create that. I'm going to teach now the college is ready for me to teach a class on applied theater again and create, lay the foundation of the beginnings of this creation, basically teaching people the methodology, of ritual poetic drama and how you apply it to the devising of a piece of work. And then we'll probably in the spring create that work and then promote, put it up in the theater.
Is this the first time that you've had that, like a course teaching how to teach it?
We did it once. Remember I told you that's when we created the pick.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. And then I just didn't have the support to do it again. So we did our own work. What we did is we created contracts with community organizations. Like we created a play with an organization that deals with the homeless and their mental illness, homelessness and mental illness. So that was a piece that we created with an organization. We created another one with an organization about addiction, and then we created another piece with an organization about bullying, which became our bread and butter for a while. We were touring that in schools and, doing workshops. And then we created a piece about housing discrimination for an organization. So that we started creating pieces where people contracted us to create the piece.
Right.
And that was for probably about 5 or 6 years. And in the meantime, we're still doing, when people want to hire us, we've gone to different places, taken shows to different places and done workshops.
Yeah.
But it's been 20 years.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy. I imagine that, I know that, I imagine that there are people that are going to be interested in seeing something like this, and getting an idea of what we've kind of talked about in this interview. And I know that there's not really much out there available because purposefully you've said that you don't want this to just be something that's like on video or uploaded online because it doesn't translate properly and you don't get the dialogue after the play and after seeing these shows.
Yeah. We're going to have to, we're going to have to adjust a little.
Yeah.
I still don't want to necessarily, unless say we get some big money grant and we can film Uncle Tom Deconstructed, for example, with all, so that people do have the full experience. And then we do kind of a live streamed dialogue, where people can ask questions and whatnot, like we've been doing. this pandemic has put us in, all of us into a whole other kind of state of being. And we've got to figure out ways to make it work, even though we're not physically in the same space, just as a placeholder for hoping to be in the same space at some point, because that is the potency of the work. But I have found in these workshops that we've been doing through Zoom, it's still very powerful. It still works, even though it's virtual.
I see. So something that you may not have considered before because of person, you're finding out it actually does still have some power.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. That's good to know. That's awesome. I think just one other thing that I was curious about, kind of connecting back to Joe's question earlier was, what were the responses like from the audiences in Virginia versus in Seattle?
Well, I mean, it was interesting because Black people were extremely vocal. When we had our post-play discussions, we're extremely vocal and we're extremely thankful and we're extremely this is, the first time they felt like their voice was, because we were talking taboo subjects. I mean, we were talking stuff that people don't talk about. And I found that, whereas when I left the East Coast, because I left the East Coast when I was like 25, right? And then I came back much later. I had raised my kids. I was a different person, like you say, Joe. I was a different person after I had come to Seattle and grown into my womanhood, raised kids, gotten my doctorate, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm coming back to the East Coast. And I always remembered the East Coast as being more progressive in a lot of ways than the West Coast, right? But I came back and found it was way more provincial than I had remembered, right? Because Nate Ramos, for example, who was up in New York, those folks that went up to New York, right? Yeah. They kept telling me we need to bring the Conciliation Project to New York. Now I'm thinking, New York, come on now, New York, they must be having the conversation. They must be, doing the thing. Nate is like, Dr. T, white people up here are just out of control. Basically, he's like, they are not used to having people of color address them and address their whiteness and their privilege and their, all that stuff you're saying to people out in Seattle. These people over here are not used to hearing that. Yeah. And he was talking about New York and that, it's just like, but I had lived in Seattle for 23 years at that point. So I hadn't really lived on the East Coast, so I had to take his word for it. That's what he was saying. And I found that out when I came back over here, to Richmond, Virginia, so the Black people sort of, at that time felt constrained. They had found their lane and they were just staying in it basically, and nobody was crossing over the yellow line. And I came in and I was like, what yellow line? I mean,
we're shaking things up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad wanted me to get bodyguards and all kinds of stuff. It's like, nah, I'm okay.
What about the white people in the audience? Did you notice any much different from them, or was that pretty similar?
It was pretty similar. Some of them, it was pretty similar, because the thing that if you're in that frame of mind of I'm a good white person, right? So you've got that as your armor. Yeah. You refuse to see or hear that it doesn't matter how good you are. Your intentions do not matter. What matters is that we are talking about an institutionalized structure of white supremacy and racism that you're born into and
Right.
privilege that you carry on your skin that unless you're aware of it, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's everywhere. That's universal. So I think the white people here were just as kind of resistant to that conversation and to being identified as white as the people in Seattle were. I think here they work undercover, right? In Seattle, they let their feelings out over there. Here they work undercover. They go behind your back and start sowing seeds of discord and try to keep you from getting tenure and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still here in Seattle, and it still is kind of, it's like you don't have to drive far out of the city until you see Trump flags either. You know what I mean? Like Seattle is definitely in its own little bubble. To share a personal note, like I remember in high school, a girl telling me that how all white people are racist. And I had a real hard time with it. Because I think it has to do with the nuance of the word, in that the difference between like harboring hate in your heart to the structural racism and how it can benefit you. And so I remember, and then it may have been in your class, I don't remember exactly. But I remember my own frame of thought transitioning into understanding privilege and how that represented me, and the privilege that I carried from, and like, again, like carrying that armor of I'm a good white person and I have friends of color, right? Which is, and all that stuff. But then transitioning into an acceptance of what it means to be white in America versus what it means to be brown or black. And I think even still to this day, people, they hear the racism word and they go, what do you mean? I don't hate anybody, but it's a difference between that and acknowledging just the systemic issue and the systemic privilege that I experience, and it's something that I get being a white man, being a cisgender white man, being a man, all these layers that, as you say, are intersectional.
Mm-hmm. And that
I think it's hard. It's hard for a lot of people to come to terms with that because they hear racism and they think, "Oh, I'm a bad person," and it's like, and it's hard. So I think it's getting. I don't know. It almost feels like we need more vocabulary on it. We need to better define it or something, just to help these people get on board. Because I think a lot more could if they could put their guard down for a minute.
Yeah, the thing is, the thing is the exhaustion. Like, for example, our government, there's leaders in the government who don't believe that policing in America is full of institutional racism, systemic racism. They don't believe, they believe there might be racism there, but it's not systematic or institutional.
Yeah.
So there's that.
We're a nation of laws.
Yeah. There's the denial that is never ending. And the thing is, we could call it a watermelon.
There's that too.
I would say, if you want me to call it a watermelon, I'll call it that. Whatever helps get rid of it, that's what I'll do. If that's what you need.
I didn't mean to say.
No. I'm not. I
just want to be clear. I'm not saying that you need to like change your verbiage. I'm very.
I know, Joe. I know.
I put my guard down. I knew. I told Mike that I figured out at some point I was going to get told something that was going to be uncomfortable. But I'm here for that. I'm here for the awkwardness, and I'm here for that's part of the work. So I'm here to I'm here to help do the work.
One thing that I've just been really thinking about that is something that needs to be explained and made clear to people to help them understand is that you don't have to be racist to benefit from white privilege.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people just equate those two things, right? When they hear white privilege, they think, oh, well, I'm not racist. It's like, no, that's not what it is. Either you're not getting the concept, And I was even saying to Joe earlier that, back 20 years ago or whatever, when we were doing stuff at the Little Theater, that was probably the first time that I had heard the term white privilege. Like, you know, when we started having these discussions about things, and now, and I wasn't hearing it in any kind of mainstream conversations back then, and now it's like
everywhere.
It's everywhere. So, I mean, you know, that seems like it's some kind of a step, but
well, and the other thing is that people need to recognize that if you are not anti-racist, you are racist.
Right.
Right. You know, that you literally have to work at it. You can't just, you know, say I'm a good person and not do anything.
Right.
So
I hope it's going to get better.
No, you're complicit. You are complicit, and you are complicitly participating in structural, institutional, and systemic racism every single day, unless you're doing the opposite of that.
Right.
Unless you're doing that. You know, the thing that white people don't, privilege is another thing that people have a hard time with. And I'm not ever saying that there aren't certain white people, there aren't white people who haven't had a hard time, who haven't had challenges, who haven't, you know, who are poor, might be poor or might be, you know, without. What I'm saying is their whiteness didn't have anything to do with that.
Right.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, that you are privileged to talk about racism without ever having to have experienced it yourself.
Yeah. That word privilege is the part that gets people caught up too, right?
Yes. And I'm just saying, you know, nobody's saying you didn't have a hard time. We're just saying your white skin didn't do anything to make you have a hard time.
Yeah.
That's all, you know?
Yeah.
It didn't do anything to participate in the hard time that you had.
Yeah. And may even have helped you out of a few situations.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
More than likely. Yeah.
Yeah, more than likely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. T, I feel like we've taken quite a bit of your time already, and I know that we could all just sit here and keep talking about this.
Yeah, we could. We'll have to get together when I visit out there.
Yeah. Please. I also have young Ryan O'Connor is coming over here to visit.
Really?
And my wife just texted me that he just pulled up. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, tell him hello. I don't know when I've spoken to him, but you know, anyway, please. Yeah, it's been a while.
Me either. That guy never calls me either. So
he doesn't. He doesn't call me, definitely.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for taking this time. We really appreciate it. You know, we didn't really know what we were going to talk about or how we were going to talk about it, but you know, I think we were able to kind of cover a bunch of different things and also, you know, get some of your history, which is
story
as well. So,
well, I love both of you, and I'm very proud of both of you.
Thank you.
And Joe, you know, I don't say that about a lot of white men. So
you made it, Joe. You made it.
It means a lot. I do remember one time, I still see this is how powerful you are. Your presence is I still remember, like, I got to see, when my wife was pregnant with our first child, we got to go see Smokey Robinson at the Emerald Queen Casino. And my future mother-in-law at the time, she got us backstage, and I got a picture with me and Smokey Robinson, and I got his hand on my wife's pregnant belly. And I still remember, Dr. T, you commented, you said, "Joe, you are my hero." And I was, and when Dr. T said, "I am her hero," that shows you how powerful that was, because I still remember it. So, I love you, Dr. T.
I love you too. And thanks. It was great talking to you guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And, you know, I think about things that, you know, come from discussions that we had or things that I learned from you pretty much almost daily, because, you know, there's a lot that resonates and comes up in daily life. So I appreciate everything that you've done too.
Thank you. And my greetings to your families. Stay safe and healthy. And the Conciliation Project is www.theconciliationproject.org.
Nice.
All right. Well, let's
right.
stay in contact and keep us updated with new stuff that's coming on, and hopefully we'll see you when you come back out to Seattle.
All right, and say hi to Ryan for me.
I will.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Miguel, are we going to say peace as well? Oh, here we are.
Yeah, there we go. That was awesome.
Well, we have to do an epilogue now. Let's make it brief. Though. I don't know. That was really that was a good conversation. And I don't know. I clearly neither one of us want to edit that, so we should just
sorry, Rusty.
put it out in all its glory.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think there's anything much that we need to edit out. We could definitely watch it back and see if there's anything, but I don't think so. If anything, just for time more than anything else.
Yeah, I don't know how long it is either. I don't have a phone or a time in front of me, so
yeah, it's been like over 2 hours. So pretty standard, biggest.
Yeah, standard.
Yeah.
The biggest Zoom chat.
Yeah, biggest Zoomcast.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I mean that's what you said.
That is what I said. Zoomcast. Yeah. All right. Or
well, yeah, it was good. It was good first anything that we've done in months.
It was great. I mean, we still got it clearly.
Clearly.
We'll talk offcast about what's coming up next, but I'm sure we have more Zoomcast to go. So for the biggest podcast, I'm Hawkinsburg.
Miguel Rockwell. We're out of here.
See ya.
It's the biggest.